My name is Norman Mendoza. I am currently taking my PhD studies here at the Education University of Hong Kong. I am the co-founder and the founding advisor of LifeRisks PH, which is a nonprofit youth organization registered under the National Youth Commission, founded in November 2018. The organization is focused on increasing mental health awareness, particularly surrounding youth suicide and substance use, as well as the community's overall mental health and well-being. We've been doing work with a lot of students in our region. We are based in Pampanga, particularly in Angeles City. And we have so far, by the numbers, reached around 12,000 students in our region. And we're looking into helping more cities and municipalities as we try to achieve a community where mental health is really something that is acknowledged.
Right now, of course, we're facing the pandemic. And how has this affected your business operations?
Since our founding in November 2018, every month we were able to visit at least 2 schools and give talk to at least 80 students, and the upper limit is around 350. However, that kind of monthly kind of streak stopped when the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic came, and that was in the month of March. We were not able to obviously visit schools or visit students, and that has, of course, hindered our main program, which is called the Life Talk. Life Talk is when we invite content experts to provide talks on mental health and well-being to schools, and that has stopped because of the outbreak. So in last March, we were not able to visit any schools.
But did you decide to pivot your business during this pandemic?
We did. What we actually did was first week of March, there was already some, not rumors, but some speculation surrounding potential public health measures that would be implemented by the Philippines. And so we did pivot in such a way that we transitioned, much like any other business or organization now. We tried to pivot to going to the online. So a few things that were in our heads were to conduct things online by online counseling and stuff like that. But we know these would require particular training, and we may not have the capacity to do just that. So what we tried to do was to develop our survey, 𝐺PULSE, which we have been doing since the earthquakes last year in many parts of the country. 𝐺PULSE is short for Global People's Unexpected Life Event Self-Evaluation. It's mainly a survey that's for people to take. It has a research element to it, but at the same time, people answering it will also get feedback. So they would know where they fall in terms of their symptoms of anxiety or depression or mental health or well-being. I think this is where we pivoted once we knew that a public health measure such as the ECQ was to be implemented.
So far, how is this 𝐺PULSE COVID survey doing?
It has been doing unprecedentedly well thanks to the support of a lot of people in social media. I think it holds true that if you do something right and if you dedicate something to it, people would find meaning in it and people would do it. By the numbers, we were able to reach 10,013 people. We were able to provide them with their own personal self-evaluations. And then that's by the numbers. And we were able to put together these with the help of a lot of people. Rappler mentioned it in their page. ABS-CBN News cited our sleep study. And a lot of people are sharing it, and we find it very meaningful. Thank you.
So being an expert, what is your take on mental health now?
Wow, that is a very broad stroke question on mental health. It's very positive that we have a mental health law now. I know the implementing rules and regulations has just been put to set. And even before the regulation, this pandemic came in. So a lot of hiccups surrounding how to promote mental health in the Philippines. But my perspective now on mental health is I'd like to have an optimistic view of it. I think people are getting to know more about it. People are acknowledging it. But at the same time, we should also acknowledge the obstacles surrounding it. We know that there is a lot of stigma surrounding mental health. When a veteran who fought in Marawi was shot, but he was known to have PTSD, that brought the conversation on mental health back again, at least in the Philippines. And people around the world acknowledge that the next kind of problem that we would face after this pandemic is really a lot of mental health concerns. So My perspective is optimistic. I also acknowledge the potential obstacles surrounding addressing mental health concerns.
Since the mental health is quite new, I mean, as compared to other countries, do you think that Filipinos are becoming more aware of this, or do they take it in a different way? What's your observation?
It's very tricky, I can tell you, Miss Dork, because we know that all everywhere else, mental health is something that's being acknowledged. You know, some people would even include it, or well, some countries would even include it under their insurance system. So you can also seek mental health
Mm.
support or psychiatric support under insurance. But in the Philippines, I think people within the average age, like 26 years old, well, the median age of the Philippines is 23 years old. But
Mm-hmm.
people belonging in this age range, I would say 21 to maybe late 20s,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the millennial generation, have a better understanding, I should say, of mental health.
Mm.
Because mental health is nuanced. It's not just crazy as we knew it from our culture before. It's not just sira ulo. Hindi lang siya baliw. A lot of it is really nuanced, and it
Mm-hmm.
could be
Mm-hmm.
behavioral in terms of gambling. It can be alcohol misuse. It could be
Mm, I
substance
see.
use. It could be depression, anxiety, and we could go on and on. But I think in the Philippines, an age group is aware of it. Now the battle is how to inform perhaps the more seasoned people in different fields, trying to make sure that they also know how mental health works. We know that, you know, Ms. Nor, the science in information dissemination has a 17-year
Mm-hmm.
gap between first world and third world countries, which means before we see
Wow.
progressive things happening in the Philippines, as is happening in UK or US, Australia, or these other progressive countries, we are bound to wait for 17 more years. I mean, in theory, we hope we can shorten that gap by
Oh
doing a lot
my.
of these mental health awareness campaigns. I'm sure if we continue what we do, we could hopefully reduce the gaps between how far we are from other countries.
After the ECQ, who will be the groups who will be most affected in terms of mental health?
But we don't know yet, but our data shows that with our sample who indicated that they were frontline workers, we find that 54% of them actually would meet the criteria for severe PTSD symptoms or post-traumatic stress symptoms. One particular group that would be vulnerable for mental health concerns would be those who have experienced stressful events that might have caused injury to themselves or others, or even risk to death, which is obviously the COVID-19 virus. So I think particular group are frontline workers,
Mm-hmm.
which would be affected. I think the data also suggests that people who are in lower socioeconomic status would also be put into a higher risks in terms of having more mental health or psychological burden. I understand that this is not only true for the Philippines, but across the world, people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds would be
Mm-hmm.
heavily put to risk. And I'm not saying that being poor makes you more ill or gives you more mental health concerns. I think the argument is, the pandemic itself would create a mental health burden, but more specifically for those who are from the lower, nasa laylayan, so people who are
Mm-hmm.
from the lower end of the SES. So that those two, I think, are the two most vulnerable groups now: people who are in the front line and people who are in the lower end of the spectrum of SES.
If you were to give, say, three important tips.
Maybe I would anchor the tips on what we found in the GPULSE study. So we now know that 23% of the population would exhibit or would meet the criteria for generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. So which means they are experiencing symptoms of anxiety or worry, which is above the average. That's like 1 in 5 people. So after this pandemic, you look at 5 people and statistics will tell you that one of them would be severely anxious during the pandemic or maybe even after. So with that, I think my first tip is to acknowledge the sense of anxiety, the feeling of anxiety. A lot of experiences with pandemic, when there was SARS or Ebola, we know that when people worry, they actually do good things. So they stay at home, so they follow
Mm.
public health measures. So worry is good. However, when put to a level that is higher than that, which makes it a little bit more irrational already. For example, even with the lack of supplies, you don't want to go out of the house because of the fear of, you know, getting the virus. I think that's when it gets tricky, because we have to acknowledge that in these uncertain situations, it's normal to be worried. So worry is actually the norm. But if you
Mm.
put that to another level, it doesn't put you to sleep anymore. It makes you easily started. It makes you restless, hindi ka mapakali, or irritable at home, especially now you're just, you know, plugged up at home with you and your family members. That's when it becomes a source of concern. So I think one is to acknowledge that worry is normal, and we should just embrace that, validate that
Mm-hmm.
feeling,
Mm-hmm.
but don't let that feeling come in the way of trying to be healthy and trying to do the right thing in this pandemic. So that's one. So any feeling is valid nowadays. If you feel angry, frustrated, upset, those are all
Mm-hmm.
normal. Just carry on, do the right thing, stay at home, do proper hygiene and all that. I think that's tip number one. Tip number two, I think, is also aligned with our findings on sleep. We know that 25% of
Mm.
people are having trouble sleeping, and this is obvious because, you know, the lockdown basically changed the patterns and routines of people. There's no more school, there's no work for most people, and so this would naturally change our
Mm-mm.
sleep habit. We might sleep later, and then effectively we would wake up later. So my tip to that is this: try to be back to normal. People need to do normal things. It doesn't matter what time you wake up. What matters most is you wake up at the same time. The
Mm-hmm.
body thrives in regularity, and we know that sleep
Oh, yeah.
hygiene, right, sleep hygiene requires that we wake up at the same time every day. For people who
Mm-hmm.
are working from
Mm-hmm.
home, I think it's better if when they wake up, they drink 2 glasses of water, they stretch, and they take a bath before really doing the work. If you're from the work from home, because
Mm.
this is really
Mm.
central. Because if you're still wearing your pajamas, being comfortable, that's also good. But at the same time, it would not feel right. So the body needs to be cued or prompted that, okay, I'm gonna get to work. So I need to get dressed, you know, I need to take a bath, I need to do my own stuff. So that's number two. Try to wake up at the same time every day, regardless of what time ka natulog. Kasi imagine if you slept at 1 a.m., right? And then your target wake up time is
Mm.
8. You would say that you only are
Mm-hmm.
running on
Mm-hmm.
7 hours of sleep, which may or may not be enough. However, if you force yourself to wake up early, you'll end up also falling asleep earlier. And so that corrects the cycle. So you have to start somewhere,
Mm.
and that's by waking up
Mm.
at the same time every day. So that's where you know, acknowledge sleep. The number three, perhaps, is, you know, social support. I'm getting this from my co-founder, Paul Lianco. At least once a day, you know, spend time with a family member. Eating together, I think, is a very good source of social support. Although some people, you know, sometimes quarrel on dining tables, but that's normal. I
Uh-huh.
think people should just recognize, you know, communicate well, and provide social support to your family members. This is not an easy time to be alive,
Yeah.
but we are being tested,
Yeah.
and we know Filipinos are hopeful and resilient, and so we need to anchor that there. So social support. And maybe if I can still squeeze one more tip in there, is just to acknowledge that the main thing here is to survive. You know, a lot of people
Mm.
are being
Yes. Very
productive.
true.
My Facebook friends would tell me that they are posting certificates of them, you know, completing online courses, and it's really something to applaud, right? But at the same
Uh-huh.
time, some other people may not have the same resources that they have. You know, some people may not have the internet or whatever. So I feel like, you know, if you want to be productive, try to you know, invigorate old hobbies. That's fine. Try to learn new materials. That's also fine. But at the same time, don't feel pressure to come out of this quarantine and be a better person. If you do become a better person, maybe, Mr. That's good, and that's very well. But
Mm.
if not, that doesn't make you less of who you are. So I think, don't put too much
Oh.
pressure on yourself. Just try to take it one day at a time. So those are my three tips. Four.
Wow.
Sorry.
4, yeah, plus an extra. Thank you for
Plus
that
an extra one.
extra. I'd like to give you this time to promote your business, so feel free to do
Right.
so.
So I'm taking this time to promote LifeRisks PH, which is a mental health awareness campaign or organization, which is nonprofit. We do a lot of work with our life talks, and we've just recently done our life talk webinar, where we talked about how to maintain people's well-being amid the COVID-19 pandemic. We would like to encourage you to visit our Facebook page to look at our contents and share them so that more people will know more about mental health, particularly in our community nowadays. We share a lot of resources for free. We share our slides for free. We even have our free online self-evaluation called GPULSE. If you are, clueless about how you're feeling these days, whether you feel is this normal or not, I think you can spend some 10 minutes of your time to take that survey, and it will help you identify, sleep, social support, anxiety, depression, even well-being. And I think these are important measures for you to, know more about yourself as you go through, and you will go through this pandemic.
Could you please share a message about COVID Diaries, the millennial collaboration?
COVID Diaries, the millennial collaboration. I think you're doing meaningful work. A lot of people take a back step on at these times, but you guys are, at the forefront, trying to do work that is meaningful at the same time where you find your strength is anchored in trying to tell the stories of people who, are trying to do their best during this pandemic. And I hope you succeed in this endeavor. And I hope that, once this is all done and you'd see the effort that you did. And again, as how you've started this interview, people would look at these and perhaps cherish these experiences that they have, and thank COVID Diaries for, shedding a spotlight for these people.